Hey, buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Gilbin is the name and Hearthstone is the game, and I have so many Rastakhan's Rumble cards to review. Of course, I got a little behind revealing the cards yesterday, so I'm doing a little bit of catch up, but I also have tons of new cards that were revealed today, including things like Hakkar, which I'm so excited to see. That said, we're going to go at a super rapid pace through this. I don't have a lot of time. I got a lot of cards to talk about, but there are still some quick reviews at the end of the video. You can hit the link in the description to check out my 5-star ratings for these cards. Otherwise, we're going to try to move through these a little faster than normal and without any cuts. We're just going to fly through, so hopefully I don't mess up and we don't have to do any retakes. So up first, we have Hakkar the Soulflayer himself. 10 mana, 9/6, neutral legendary minion. Death Rattle reads, shuffle the Corrupted Blood into each player's deck. And the Corrupted Blood is essentially a spell you're putting into your opponent's deck and into your deck as well. We've seen similar effects with things like Firetree Witchdoctor, shuffling things into your deck. It is cast when drawn. Now what that means is you draw it. It goes off, okay? It is going to draw you a new card. That's what the cast when drawn keyword now means. Deck of Wonders, Firetree Witchdoctor, they all have this keyword now. When it goes off, you're going to take 3 damage. It's going to draw you another card from your deck, some other card, and then it's going to shuffle 2 copies of Corrupted Blood into your deck again. So the first time it goes off, it can't chain into a new Corrupted Blood. There is a gap in between where it's drawing you some other card, so it's not going to create like this infinite chain of Corrupted Bloods where they just keep scaling like crazy because they keep shuffling extra copies in. But it still does present this scary potential where eventually if you draw enough cards, you're going to fill your entire deck with Corrupted Bloods and you're just going to die. It scales exponentially and you're just going to keep taking ridiculous amounts of damage, which presents a card with this really cool alternate win condition. The downside is it's symmetrical. So how do you make your opponent draw more Corrupted Bloods and die faster than you do? You need armor, you need fatigue, you need ways to cheese your deck like Prince Liam or something to make sure that you survive. That's going to be tough. Beyond that, Hakkar is a really slow play. 10 mana card. The effect is a death rattle, so it's really susceptible to silences and polymorphs and all kinds of other things. All that said, very interesting win condition and a scary one, in fact, but ultimately I think a little too slow to be a powerful card. Only very niche decks that try to pull off a specific combo are ever going to make this thing work by cheesing it out early. And even then, they have to have other supporting pieces. All that's going to be hard. So, although Hakkar is very cool, I can't wait to try him. I don't think he's going to be a particularly competitive card. That said, let's talk about Master Voone, the new legendary for Warrior. And you might be thinking this looks a little different than perhaps a card you saw in the reveal video for Master Voone. Apparently, he's changed a fair bit since some early designs. They revealed initially a 5-mana 4/4, but in reality, it seems, based on some announcements they've made since then, Master Voone's actually going to be a 4-mana 4/3. And that makes this card scary good. Like, really, really good. The battle cry here, copy all dragons in your hand. So if this guy is played in a dragon deck, you're going to be generating a lot of cards, essentially drawing a ton of stuff. And for a 4-mana 4/3, that's a really strong effect. Think, for instance, to our friend the Elven Minstrel in Rogue. A 4-mana 3/2 that conditionally draws you 2 cards. That's an incredibly strong card played in virtually every style of Rogue. Very powerful. Master Voone ups the ante. He's got better stats, the same cost, and he's also generating cards based on cards you have, so it's controllable. It's almost a tutor of sorts in a way because you're getting dragons that you probably like. So clearly a lot of positive aspects to this card to like. Now, I will say it's more of a value card than a tempo card. It's more about generating resources and than it is, impacting the board immediately. So clearly looks more like a mid-range minion or a control style minion than maybe an aggro minion. But if there's enough really aggressive fast dragons, you could still use this as a reload tool as well. That said, we don't typically see fast aggressive dragons. Usually we see slower, greedier, scary late game dragons. So Voone will probably fit best into that environment, and it'll make a lot of sense because you can get multiple Ysseras, multiple Malagos, bone drakes, whatever you want, whatever giant value dragon you're looking for, War Master Voone's going to make you additional ones. I think there could occasionally be instances where it's not that good, where you just have 1 or 2 dragons in hand. But even then, with just 1 or 2 dragons, War Master Voone's not particularly bad, because dragons rely on having dragons in hand. And this increases the consistency of that. That way, if you only do have 1 dragon in hand, you might be able to activate the dragon synergy card for that dragon, or a different dragon synergy card. We don't know what kind of dragon synergy cards we're going to have, but it just allows you to play to that deck style so perfectly. So to me, this card looks absolutely fantastic. I think it's incredibly strong. And, you know, sure, if Dragon Warrior doesn't become a thing, you might not see this. But frankly, even with just 1 or 2 dragons in a control deck, maybe you would anyway. And if Dragon Warrior does become a thing, this card's going to be an absolute star. That said, let's move on to Gral the Shark, the new Loa for Rogue, a 5-mana 2/2 beast. The battle cry reads, eat a minion in your deck and gain its stats, which is amazing. And then with the death rattle, you then add that minion to your hand. So you might just grab a 3/3. Gral the Shark becomes a 5-mana 5/5 with a death rattle that essentially draws you whatever minion you ate. It's not creating a copy because it's eating the first one and then adding it back to your hand. So it's almost like a 5/5 death rattle with draw card if you get a 3/3, but it could also be a 10/10 if you get an 8/8. You know, the stats are rather variable. It could be a 3/3 if you only get a 1/1, which would be unfortunate. But of course, you're going to try to build your deck in ways to support Gral. The question is, how challenging is that? Do you have to run all big stuff? Is this better in an aggro or mid-range deck because it's just a stat line? It's not going to be some huge value piece necessarily. Is it something you use to tutor out the only minion in your deck so you make sure you add it to your hand? Can you combo it with the darkness to make it a 22/22 minion for 5 mana? A lot of questions to be answered here, but ultimately the answers are always leaving me with doubts. Like, okay, that's not that good of a play. Okay, that's not a big enough body. Okay, it's really susceptible to silence. Like really, really susceptible to silence. And a lot of cards are susceptible to silence, and that's not a reason to hate on them. But this one's really susceptible to silence. So a lot of challenges for Gral. Interesting with things like the Spirit of the Shark. Certainly you could stack the stats even higher and make yourself a huge 5-mana minion. But I'm not sure that's great in Hearthstone these days. So unless there's some specific combo that makes this thing work, I think Gral the Shark has more challenges than successes. That said, let's move on to the Zandalari Templar, 4-mana 4/4 for Paladin. The battle cry reads, if you've restored 10 health this game, gain +4/+4, and taunt. So a bit like Hooked Reaver for Warlock, a 4-mana minion that gets bigger and has taunt, but instead of, you know, damage being the condition or damage taken being the condition, or I guess I should say your total health being the condition, this one's all about restoring health instead. And I do think that's far more challenging for Paladin to do right now than for Warlock to do. If you think about this card, Warlock just, if you're playing against an aggressive deck, for instance, you just take damage naturally. That's going to happen throughout the course of the game. You don't really have to do anything to make your Hooked Reaver get activated against aggro. Against control, you do have to do things, but Warlock's really good at taking damage. So in either instance, Warlock can really consistently activate that Hooked Reaver. A vast majority of the time it's being played as a 7/7. For Zandalari Templar, I'm not convinced it's going to be as easy to activate. First off, taking damage can be a challenge in Paladin. It doesn't necessarily, healing damage in Paladin could be a challenge. It doesn't happen automatically. You have to use your healing spells. You have to have lifesteal minions. You have to have taken damage already, which so far is harder in Paladin as well. All of that means I think this one's going to be a bit harder to achieve than something like Hooked Reaver, and a little bit less consistent than Hooked Reaver. So I don't think this is as strong of a card as Hooked Reaver. That doesn't mean it's unplayable. I think if a heal Paladin deck shapes up, this is exactly the sort of thing that would be amazing. So as more support cards come for Paladin, whether it's this expansion or in the future, this is a card that has some fundamental strengths you should definitely keep an eye on. Just don't look for it right away, but someday a 4-mana 8/8 is going to make sense in Paladin, and I think this card will be very, very strong. So that said, let's move on to Spirit of the Tiger for Paladin. We saw Shriek the Loa previously. Now we see Spirit of the Tiger, and 4 mana for this Spirit, 0/3 of course, stealth for 1 turn of course, and it's spell synergies as you might expect. After you cast a spell, summon a tiger with stats equal to its cost. So Shriek's cost goes down as you cast spells. With this one, you get free bodies when you cast spells. So if you were to play Spirit of the Tiger, for instance, and Spike Ridge Steed on the same turn, you would end up with a 2/9 Spirit of the Tiger and a 6/6 extra Tiger on board. And that would be a pretty sick play, I think. And your Spirit of the Tiger would have stealth. So the next turn, you could maybe play like a Lay on Hands and get an 8/8 for free as well. Or maybe a new Challenger to get a 7/7 for free. And that's pretty good. And then even if you think about things like Blessing of Kings, you know, getting an extra 4/4 bundled into your Blessing of Kings, that's a pretty exciting play. So I think Spirit of the Tiger has a lot of potential to generate some really impressive boards, whether it's in a mid-range deck, it can maybe even be in a control deck too, or you're just looking to stabilize some mid-game threats or late-game threats for counter pressure. To me, this card pays off pretty well, and it doesn't need to live forever. Just 1 or 2 turns is enough. The cost is a little high, so it's kept in check. If this were like a 2-mana minion, you could do some crazy things immediately. I think this one pays off more on the second turn than in the first turn, but I do still think it pays off. So I like this card. See some real potential for it in Paladin. I think this is a very well-designed Spirit, and I think it's going to be played. That said, let's move on to the Untamed Beastmaster. I think that's me, an old version of me in the artwork there, guys. I get buff and get an even more impressive hairline. 3 mana, 3/4 neutral card. Whenever you draw a beast, give it +2/+2. And first off, 3 mana, 3/4, good stat line. So this thing already has some merits for sure. And in a beast deck that's looking to snowball into some scary mid-game beasts, why not? Untamed Beastmaster can allow you to do that. That said, though, you know, there's a delay on those stats. They take a while to happen because you have to draw the card and then you also have to play that card. So pretty slow payoff on this for what would appear to be more of an aggressive game plan. I think that's going to be a challenge for Untamed Beastmaster, Beastmaster's what I just said, for Beastmaster to overcome. But there might be a hunter deck out there that's able to draw some cards. You could combo with Quest Hunter, for instance, to make your Carnassus Brood stuff go crazy. 1 mana 5/4s and just cycle those all the time and reload the board. So keep an eye on it, but ultimately a card I don't think is going to see a lot of play outside of Arena, for instance, or maybe just 1 or 2 niche beast decks in the future, but probably never a meta-defining card. Moving on, we have the Firetree Witchdoctor, just revealed right before I recorded this. A new 2 mana, 2/2 neutral dragon synergy card, which is awesome. I love that we're getting dragon synergy cards back. If you're holding a dragon, discover a spell. And that's just good, right? Solid stat line, a good effect here as long as you have a dragon. You're getting an extra card added to your hand. So you're basically, good cycle. Way better than something like Novice Engineer because you're discovering, so you get to pick what it is. All around, just a good 2 mana card. If you're in a dragon deck, this is probably something you're going to want to run if you're not running Keleseth or in a post-Keleseth world. I mean, Warrior right now looks like the dragon class. Warrior does have some wonky spells to discover, right? There's some really cheap, awkward stuff along with some really good high-end stuff. So the consistency there might be up to question. We'll have to see. But I can envision like Mage. Maybe there's even a Hunter Dragon deck on the horizon. We've seen some Dragon Hunter cards teased. But whatever class you pick, I think this is still going to be a fit as long as dragons make sense in it. I like this card a lot. Just universally, fundamentally makes sense. So moving on, we have the Raiding Party for Rogue. And this is a 3 mana spell. You draw 2 pirates from your deck. And then if you combo it, you also get to draw a weapon, which is really good, guys. This is an arcane intellect that tutors plus an extra weapon draw that's also a tutor. So really good, focus-specific, narrow card draw here, which is obviously great. 3 cards for 3 mana is ridiculous card draw. The only question I have about this card is the fact that, if you're drawing pirates or if you're drawing a weapon, those 2 things obviously go well together, but do they go well together in a really aggressive deck? And in fact, does Raiding Party support that? In other words, can pirates reload successfully? If you're on turn like 5 or 6 and you're forced to play a Raiding Party and you're able to play a couple 1 or 2 mana pirates, is that going to be enough, right? Like, it's not drawing into a ton of burst damage. It's not drawing you like 8 cards like Divine Favor that lets you go for 3 or 4 more turns. It's just a little bit more. And I wonder if you can sacrifice that mana or that tempo for a little bit of an extended game plan. Like, would Myra's Unstable Element just be way better in an aggressive pirate deck? That's the question. But here's the thing. Even if it doesn't really work in a pirate deck, that weapon tutor is still going to be valuable at some point for this card because Cavern Shiny Finder is going to eventually rotate out of standard format And then we'll need a way to draw our Kingsbane or to draw our Necrium Blade. So Raiding Party could certainly fill in that gap really nicely. And regardless, this is just a card that does so many good things very efficiently. So it's going to find a home eventually. This thing's going to see play. It's a very strong card. Moving on here, we have Grave Horror for Priest. And it is basically a carbon copy of Arcane Tyrant that we saw in the past, except it has 7 attack and taunt instead of being an 8/8. And frankly, I think this card has a lot of potential. Priest has tons of cheap spells. They can cycle those cheap spells very efficiently. They have spell support cards like the Weapon or Lyra. To me, I think you could build a deck where all of that makes sense. And even if you don't, just in a normal Priest deck, eventually this is going to be like a 4-mana 7/8 taunt, which just could help you stay alive against things in the late game. It could help you establish counter pressure. So to me, I mean, this thing makes sense basically from 6 mana down. It's not going to be that hard to get that cheap, and eventually it could be a 0 mana play as well. So I think a strong card that will find some deck somewhere along the way, much like Arcane Tyrant did many times before it. Moving on, we have the Smolderthorn Lancer for Warrior. 3 mana, 3/2. It's execute on a stick with Dragon Synergy. Because if you're holding a dragon, you destroy a damaged enemy minion. And I think it's easily understood that that's a good play. And a 3/2 minion is a nice little bonus. It's almost like executes 1 mana again attached to a Bloodfin Raptor. But that's going to be a good swing on board a lot of the time in the early game. It's also just something in the late game you can use as an extra instance of single target removal. So between that, potential mid-game tempo swing, that late game removal, this is going to work very well in a dragon deck. It's not a dragon itself, which is a bit of a downside, but I don't think that's a huge problem. As we've seen from Voone, there's going to be plenty of ways to make dragons, and I think this card will fit in rather nicely into that world. So moving on, we have the Ironhide Direhorn. Now we're up to the cards that I revealed on the card reveal stream. For Ironhide Direhorn, I think this card's really just too slow. It's just a big stat bomb. The overkill might occasionally pay off, but even if it does, it's just not going to make a big enough, immediate enough impact. There is that chance if it sticks around and maybe gets a couple attacks in, or it gets multiple overkills, that you could get a couple 5/5s and suddenly it makes sense. But without being able to get overkill on defense, which doesn't work, you have to overkill on your own turn. It seems like this thing is just gonna kind of sit there and get ignored. It's probably not gonna be able to make an immediate enough impact. Even with Druid's Ramp, there are often better things to do at similar mana costs. Lich King's only 1 mana different. I think a million times better card. So I think this guy's gonna struggle unless some kind of beast deck comes up to support it. Really just too slow. So moving on, we have Oondasta, a neutral legendary minion, incredible looking dinosaur as far as I'm concerned. 9 mana 7/7 beast, much better than a previous card because it has rush, so it can immediately make an impact, which is really important for overkill. It's not just sitting there waiting to be eaten by removal, and you're getting some instant value. And the overkill here allows you to summon a beast from your hand. And that's often good too, right? If you have a big beast, you're pretty excited to get a couple minions out, immediately trade into something on your opponent's board, you're in a good spot. The problem for a card like Oondasta is without a lot of support for really big beasts, I'm still not sure it's better than other things you can do. Like, yes, I think it makes a lot of sense in a Death Rattle Hunter deck right now as Death Rattle Hunter is built today. It's kind of a replacement for like your charged Devilsaur. It fits, it makes sense in that world. But beyond that, as Death Rattle Hunter moves out, I do think Oondasta is going to struggle a little bit. Like if you're holding on to all these beasts in your hand and you get to turn 9, like what kind of game state are you in? How did you get there? Is this thing big enough for making a huge swing or game-winning sort of development? I'm not sure it does. It's not bad with Rexar either, right? If you get some big zombies in your hand, you can cheat one out with Oondasta. So not a terrible card by any means. I think it's solid. I just don't think this is like a deck builder or a fundamentally powerful thing that's gonna, keep you up at night worried about it killing you or really defines a deck either. So some challenges for Oondasta to overcome, but a fine card nonetheless. Moving on to the Gurubashi Chicken. This is not a fine card. I think this card's terrible. I think it's going to be almost impossible to make the Gurubashi Chicken work. Getting it to more than 1 attack is going to be tough. And then even when you do, and it gets that overkill, like, what's the point, right? Then you've maybe got like, you know, 1 or 2 health minion with 6 attack that's like a magma rager instead of just a 1/1. Like, even when this thing works, it's still not really going to be that impactful or doing that much. Maybe there are some sneaky ways to use this in combo decks, but even then, for overkill to work, it has to attack a minion, so there's no like OTK setup that I can think of unless you're perhaps copying chickens and giving them charge. I don't know. It seems impossible to turn this into anything good. There's just nothing in my brain that spins this towards a strong card. Now, that said, it is going to be in the Deathstalker Rexar hero, or the hero power card pool. Zombeast pool would have been a much more efficient way to say that. So as a part of a Zombeast, this could be amazing, right? Giving a big Zombeast the ability to gain extra attack, maybe some Wind Fury stuff thrown in there. Gurubashi Chicken makes a ton of sense for Zombeast, not much as as a card on its own, unless we see some crazy thing to support it, but that's kind of always the case, so probably not worth saying. So Gurubashi Chicken, not particularly good. So that said, let's talk about a new challenger. 7-mana spell for Paladin. Discover a 6-cost minion, summon it with Taunt and Divine Shield. And what a nice spell to have for a Spirit of the Tiger or Shrivala deck. Suddenly you have a way to play onto the board while still playing a spell, contributing to your synergy. So you get a 7/7 if you have a Spirit out on the field, along with a 6-cost with Taunt Divine Shield. Like, that's suddenly a really cool play. And I have to say, you know, I think 6-cost Taunt Divine Shield, that's pretty good for 7 mana. If you take most 6-mana minions, you give them Taunt and the Divine Shield, they become really scary good cards and annoying and frustrating to deal with. I mean, take Sunwalker, for instance, not as a card you'd want to summon here with the new challenger, but it's a Chillwind Yeti with Taunt and Divine Shield. Basically, you took a 4-mana card, and for 2 extra mana, you got these effects. So that makes New Challenger look efficient in a way almost. If you applied that same 2-mana penalty, you'd be summoning 5-cost minions instead of 6-cost minions. So it always changes based on what 6-cost minions are in the pool and how consistently they might turn into cool things. But I think the opportunity for them to be good is pretty high most of the time. And that, to me, makes a New Challenger a pretty exciting card, particularly in combination with those other synergy pieces for Paladin right now. That said, let's move on to Zentimo. I think this card is really cool. In the style of Electrostorm Surge, a minion that's affecting how your spells work and basically making them more powerful. And he's doing so pretty cheaply at 3 mana. So whenever you target a minion with a spell, it also targets adjacent ones. And I guess this is an effect we're going to see a bit of in Rastakhan's Rumble. We've seen a few different cards do that so far. And this is so cool, both offensively, defensively, control, aggro. There are multiple ways to utilize this thing, which I think is exciting. Now, I don't really know if it's good in a rock biter world. That feels like a bit of a stretch to me. Maybe Bloodlust would just be better. But certainly for a control deck, getting multiple hexes, that seems crazy. Unstable Evolution ×3. That seems pretty cool, right? Like, there's some opportunities to do some neat things with Zentimo. So I think this card will inevitably find some deck that just loves him and utilizes him in a very cool way. So to me, a card that looks very obviously strong. Moving on, we have the Waterboy, a card that looks very obviously weak. This is basically just a free 2/1 anytime you're hero powering. But of course, a free 2/1 is really only impactful in the early game. A lot of decks don't really want to be hero powering in the early game, like a Zoo deck. They'd really much rather be playing minions than hero powering. So Waterboy wouldn't really contribute a whole lot to their game plan of playing early aggressive minions out. And then control decks just can't really afford to run a 2/1 in their deck that doesn't do much else right. So to me, Waterboy, I just don't see how this ever sees any sort of play. I don't think there's any way to enable combos with its effect or do anything sneaky with it. So it's really just kind of a stat line that doesn't make sense for aggro or control to me. I think it's going to get left behind pretty quickly. And then next up, we'll talk about Jan'alai the Dragonhawk. This is one of the coolest cards I think I've ever seen in Hearthstone. I love this card so much. 7 mana Loa for Mage. It's a 4/4 battle cry. If your hero power dealt 8 damage this game, summon Ragnaros the Fire Lord. So you get a 7 mana Rag with a 4/4 attached. That's really, really good. It's the super consistent Spiteful Summoner, and it does have a condition. You need to deal 8 damage with your hero power, so that takes a while. Like, that's not always going to be easy to do. It's not always going to be ready by turn 7. But as we'll see, and we'll talk through some additional cards here, there are going to be ways to achieve that. There are new cards to help you do more damage with your hero power, which means Jan'alai is going to activate more regularly. Now, this is a great mid-range card. like good, even maybe control card, because Ragnaros is just a good sort of minion to have. But I will say, at the end of the day, this is not the sort of card that's just like a huge value card. It's not creating infinite resources. It's not keeping you alive forever. So I don't think this is going to be the best card in the set by any means. I think it's just going to be a strong card that decks like to run, especially if they have hero power synergies, maybe an odd mage, of course. But this is not a 5-star card, even though it might look like it. I think this is pretty firmly a 4-star card because it's not going to be defining. It's not going to shape the meta or a deck. It's just a really good card that feels fantastic to play and is very well designed as far as I'm concerned. So let's move on to some of the support cards there. We have Spirit of the Dragonhawk, the Spirit for Mage, 2 mana, 0/3, stealth for 1 turn. Your hero power also targets adjacent minions. And this is how you can start to snowball up those damage points for Zandalari. Also, this just becomes a great way to clear token-style boards like Odd Paladin, pinging for tons of damage every time you ping. You turn your hero power into Shooting Star instead of just a ping, which is great. That's very powerful. This card is probably good on its own just against aggro decks, but becomes even better when you have the support pieces for it. And I think really shines when those support pieces are there. And I suspect this effect is actually going to be strong enough. There are enough support pieces to make Spirit of the Dragonhawk a card that we do see in the Hearthstone meta pretty soon and pretty regularly. So I like this card quite a bit. Moving on to Daring Fire Eater, another hero power support card. 1 mana, 1/1 minion. Battle Cry. Your next hero power this turn deals 2 more damage. That works very nicely with Spirit of the Dragonhawk, of course, giving you a 3 damage ping to 3 minions. That's a nice little board clear against many, many board states. Also, this could just be used to do a single 3 damage ping in a pinch if you have to clear something off, or instantly activate your Zandalari as quickly as you can. So nice card here, support piece for all of that. It's also an odd card, so Odd Mage works nicely. You could deal 4 damage with a ping with Daring Fire Eater and the Odd Mage hero power. So not amazing, just solid supporting piece. And then now we'll move on to some Warlock cards, and I am so freaking excited about these. I already play a ton of discard Warlock, as you guys may well know if you watch my stream. And here we got some just unbelievably good support for the archetype. First up, High Priestess Jeklik, 4 mana, 3/4, taunt and lifesteal on this card right off the bat. So that's kind of already good. Like a 4 mana, 3/4 with taunt lifesteal is not terrible. Like that's okay. I don't think that'd be played in most control decks, but it's not. You don't feel guilty playing this as a 4 mana, 3/4 with taunt lifesteal in a lot of cases. You're like, okay, yeah, I can live with that. But also, when you discard this, add 2 copies of it to your hand. So this is like the ultimate discard fuel. If you discard Jeklik, you're going to get 2 of them. And that increases your odds of discarding the next one, which means you might get 2 more. And suddenly you could have this whole hand full of High Priestess Jekliks because you're discarding them and they just keep replicating and duplicating. By the way, an idea I captured fairly closely, once again, in my custom card creations for High Priestess Jeklik. But you can quickly see how that supports discard so well. Because one of the downsides of discard is discarding things you don't want to discard. And that's a problem. But Jeklik, you love to discard it. It creates so many resources. It creates tons of survivability. And the best thing about survivability for a discard Warlock deck is that gives your quest time to activate and power up and just eventually overwhelm your opponent with 3/2s from the Nether Portal. So to me, this looks like the perfect support card. Defensively minded, empowers discards a ton, lots of resource generation, so you have tons of cards to work with once you've played the quest. It's a dream. So yes, I think this card is good on its own. I think it's going to be great for discard Warlock, and I actually think discard Warlock is going to be a viable archetype as well. So I'm buying in on High Priestess Jeklik pretty high. That said, let's talk about Soul Warden, another supporting card here, 6 mana, 6/6. Battle Cry, add 3 random cards you discarded this game to your hand. Now, we are getting a lot of good discard supporting pieces, as we'll talk through a few more, but I don't know that this is my favorite or the strongest. A lot of people have been asking for a card like this, because sometimes you discard things you don't want to discard, and it's like, oh, Soul Warden, maybe I can get him back. But unfortunately, even though this does look a bit like a 6 mana, 6/6 draw 3 cards, which sounds pretty good, right? Like that's a lot of cards to draw, or at least generate, I should say. To me, it still feels a little bit slow for what discard Warlock wants to do. It's not defensive enough. It's not slowing down your opponent. You just kind of sit it out there, and it takes a while to register the value of it. And that's not always the best thing in my mind, for a discard Warlock deck. Plus, with all these other supporting pieces, it's going to be easier than ever to control what you're discarding. And you're often going to be getting rewarded when you discard those things anyway. So Soul Warden doesn't look as necessary anymore as it used to, because you're going to be discarding a lot of High Priestess Jeklik, for instance. And then, yeah, it's fine to add some additional High Priestess Jekliks to your hand, but maybe you don't need to. Maybe there's a better 6-mana play out there. So a fine card. I like that it's supporting the archetype. It's certainly going to be tested in Discard Warlock, but I have a feeling it's eventually going to be cut. I don't think it's the best card available. That said, let's talk about a couple more. First up, we have Shriek, a new 1-mana spell for Warlock. Discard your lowest cost card and deal 2 damage to all minions. This is an unbelievably strong card. I'm actually surprised at how good this is for only 1 mana. So let's just talk about the fact that, first off, as a non-discard card, like just playing this in a control Warlock deck, I think this is very powerful. It's like the old mage spell Volcanic Potion, which, by the way, got played a ton. 3 mana, deal 2 damage to all minions. Shriek does the exact same effect, deal 2 damage to all minions. It's a very good AoE against aggressive boards. Combos nicely with things like Defile or Hellfire 2 to soften up boards for bigger clears. So right there, I think this is already good. Now, there is a downside: you discard. That's an issue sometimes, right? Because you might discard the Defile. Maybe the Defile is the other low-cost card in your hand. But because you have control, because you can set that up, because you can, do it in a sensible way, because it's not going to discard your Gul'dan, for instance, Shriek doesn't have that big of a downside compared to most discard cards. It's removing randomness, adding a little bit more influence to the player, and that's why I think it's still going to be good. Beyond that, sometimes if you play this in a discard deck, one that's intended to have discards, that's even better, because you can maybe make Jeklik the lowest cost card in your hand, or whatever other thing you want to discard. The lowest value things tend to have the lowest cost. So you're going to be discarding things you aren't that worried about. The things that you were kind of happy to lose anyway, or didn't really matter that much. So Shriek, to me, just looks great. I like the effect. The downside is not that big of a downside, and it supports the archetype really nicely. So finally, and this might actually be our final card, it is the Reckless Diretroll, another insane discard Warlock card. 3 mana, 2/6 with Taunt. That right there, again, amazing. Like, way overstated. That's going to be a huge wall against tons of decks. Again, discard Warlock, I think, is best when it's played in a control style, slowing it down so that your quest has time to work, and this is the perfect card for that. So great in the archetype. Again, discarding your lowest card, not that big of a downside, so no big deal. And good in a discard deck sometimes. And then finally, you might play this outside of discard Warlock again, just because it's such a good early game denial. And if the discard's not that impactful or that important, you'll sometimes happily sacrifice a low-cost card to build a defensive wall against aggro decks. You might even see this run in a Zoo deck aggressively. Often Zoo decks like to have minions that stick around so they can buff and play off of. Reckless Diretroll would be incredible, because Zoo decks don't really care about discarding that much either. Setting this up to eventually live into something like Fungalmancer would be incredible. So across the board, I think this guy can be played in all kinds of different decks. It's great for discard, great for aggro, great for control. This is just an unbelievably good, strong card. And that said, guys, I'm done. 24 cards reviewed, hopefully in record time. I don't know how long it took, but I felt like I was flying through the cards. That said, let's go ahead and give each of these a rating from 1 to 5 stars in my quick reviews. Hakkar the Soulflayer is a 2-star card. Master Voone is a 5-star card. Gral the Shark is a 3-star card. Zandalari Templar is a 3-star card. Spirit of the Tiger is a 4-star card. Untamed Beastmaster is a 3-star card. Firetree Witchdoctor is a 4-star card. Raiding Party is a 4-star card. Grave Horror is a 4-star card. Smolderthorn Lancer is a 4-star card. Ironhide Direhorn is a 2-star card. Oondasta is a 3-star card. Gurubashi Chicken is a 1-star card. A New Challenger is a 3-star card. Zentimo is a 4-star card. Waterboy is a 1-star card. Jan'alai the Dragonhawk is a 4-star card. Spirit of the Dragonhawk is a 4-star card. Daring Fire Eater is a 4-star card. High Priestess Jeklik is a 5-star card. Soul Warden is a 3-star card. Shriek is a 4-star card. Reckless Diretroll is a 4-star card. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for this insanely huge review. Whew, a lot of good cards. I mean, some really, really good cards. Not much filler. Lots of 4-star cards. Rastakhan's Rumble so far seems very strong. The power level is great. Tons of archetypes. I am more excited than I ever was, and I was already pretty darn excited. So, Loas are great. Everything seems cool. I mean, Hakkar, maybe not the best card, but so many promising things to consider and decks to try and some high power level stuff indeed. So I am pumped. That's it. I want to hear what you guys thought. You agree, you disagree? Am I overrating these, underrating these? Let me know in the comments below. But until then, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, game on.